and thank you for joining us for today's event, Racial Justice Reimagined, Creating Change at Columbia and Beyond. Before we get started, I would like to do a land acknowledgement created by the Columbia University School of Nursing. We acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Lenape people on which we learn, work, and gather today at Columbia University. Lenape means real person or original person, and it is important to remember that Lenape, collectively, are a living and breathing community. Let us honor their legacy. Let us commit ourselves to the struggle against forces that have dispossessed the Lenape and other indigenous people of their lands. We stand strong in our commitment to support and defend all marginalized people of this land who have been stripped of their rights to self-determination. Thank you to Columbia's Nursing School who issued this acknowledgement. We encourage you to find out more about local indigenous territories and languages which you are sitting on in this moment. We are adding to the chat now the resource, nativeland.ca, by the nonprofit organization Native Land Digital to learn more about indigenous territories, treaties, and languages across the world. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Melissa Mayard. I use pronouns she, her, hers, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Associate Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the Office of University Life. I'd also like to introduce a very special person, my partner in this work, Gabby Dominguez. Gabby, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Hi, my name is Gabby Dominguez. I use pronouns she and hers. I'm the Program Coordinator for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. And again, as Gabby mentioned, thank you for joining us today. I am so excited to share the work of these students. They have been working so hard over this last semester and really over some time to really fight for racial justice. And this event is part of University Life's Racial Justice Mini Grant Program, which promotes and advances Columbia's commitment to anti-racism. These grants will be offered annually and will provide support for students to develop innovative ideas to address racism, particularly anti-Black racism, through education, broadening the campus conversation and strengthening our campus culture of inclusion and belonging. As President Bollinger highlighted in his message to the university last July, fulfilling our institutional commitment to anti-racism is a collective effort that benefits the insights and expertise of all Columbia community members. We are proud and thankful for our inaugural grantees who actively engaged this past semester and generated innovative ideas and new opportunities for our community to understand and unlearn racism and broaden the conversation on anti-racism. We also want to thank everyone who submitted a proposal and for the high level of engagement throughout this process. And of course, thanks to our partners at the Office of the Vice Provost for Faculty Advancement and the Institute for Religion, Culture, and Public Life for helping us bring this program to fruition. This year, the grant supported 27 different grantees across 10 different projects that all worked toward the goal of advancing racial justice. Before I turn it over to our 2021 grantees to learn more on their projects, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this program will be recorded and shared via University Life's YouTube channel. If you have any questions about this recording, feel free to contact our office. Also, please make sure to remain muted. We recommend that you keep your view on speaker view versus gallery view, and we will be adding a few items to the chat throughout this presentation, including the grantees' bios and the Racial Justice Mini Grant website. Throughout today's program, we will share content from varied projects and hear from some of the grantees on their inspiration to fight for racial justice. Now I'd like to introduce our first group. Please join me in welcoming Zora's Daughters. Zora's Daughters is a society and culture podcast that uses Black feminist anthropology to think about race, politics, and popular culture. Brendan and Alyssa are two Black women anthropologists in training who follow the legacy of Zora Neale Hurston and other Black women ethnographers. In their three segments, What's the Word, What We're Reading, and What in the World, they dig deeper into social issues in a way that is accessible and entertaining. By prioritizing the issues of Black women and other marginalized communities, they empower listeners to develop the tools and languages that start the conversations and spark change. Here is a clip from one of their episodes, which you can find via various podcast streaming platforms.
And there's considerable diversity among people who consider themselves Black feminists, but there are certain premises or tenets that are constant. And she names 5 of them. And she says Black women experience a special kind of oppression and suffering in this country, which is races, sexes, and classes, because of their dual racial and gender identity and their limited access to economic resources. This was published in 1995. So obviously, at this point, because we're not static, we would add other ways of thinking about the oppression that is specific to Black women, Black femmes, gender nonconforming folks who align themselves with Black women's issues. So I want to make sure that I'm clear that this is expansive. Guy Sheftall goes on to talk about how there's a triple jeopardy that Black women are concerned about, which is different from and brings up different concerns and problems than we would have for Black men and white women. And of course, again, the timing, right, was about this divide between Black women and white women and Black men and Black women. But obviously, we would have to make that more expansive and talk about other ways in which Black women have concerns, problems, needs that are different even from other women of color, right? And then Black women must struggle for Black liberation and gender equality simultaneously. And then 4th, she says there's no inherent contradiction in the struggle to eradicate sexism and racism and all the other isms which plague the human community. And then finally, she says Black women's commitment to the liberation of Blacks and women is profoundly rooted in their lived experience. And of course, we know that is where Patricia Hill Collins roots Black feminist thought, in this understanding that Black feminism is centered on Black women's standpoint and Black women's self-defined understanding of their own oppression. So she too talked about the components of Black women's standpoint, talking about Black women's political and economic status that provides them with a distinctive set of experiences, talking also about the experiences of Black women's material reality that gives them a different understanding of Black feminist consciousness. She goes on to talk about and expand on standpoint, and really rooting the understanding even of coming up with a theoretical perspective for Black feminism in Black women's epistemological understandings of their own relationship to resistance and oppression. So even Black women's philosophy, right, even our ability to theorize is developed experientially, developed in community and dialogue, and then grounded in an ethic of care and personal accountability, which I really love that. Like those 3 things in particular, I think really ground the way that we think about, or at least the way that I think about Black feminisms. Combine that with anthropology and the fact that anthropology is the holistic study of humans. We know that we had to do some work on that definition. Anthropologists, of course, you both know this, have a 4-field approach, and we do cultural, we do biological or physical, linguistics, archaeology, and then we have all the subfields. And I think that what's key about that and what brought me to anthropology was this notion that we could understand the human existence from all these different perspectives. And when we put a Black feminist lens on that, we're talking about Black feminism going into each of these fields and creating a holistic understanding of humans. That is powerful.
Thank you, Alyssa. And once again, if you have not listened to this podcast, please do. You are going to not only learn so much, but laugh, because Alyssa and Brendan are hilarious. I have to add that. So yes, please support these 2 amazing students and anthropologists in training. They are going to definitely have a huge impact on the world. So next, I want to introduce another very, very, very special guest who really has done a lot of work to not only impact the community here at Columbia, but impact the community of Harlem. Sumaya Amin Zama and her program, Malcolm's World-Making Practice, Reclaiming His Local and Global Legacy. Columbia University Center for the Study of Muslim Societies, in partnership with the Shabazz Center, right in Columbia's backyard, put forth a discussion highlighting Malcolm X's enduring vision at the intersections of Black radical power. Islam and global anti-imperialism. As we continue organizing around the movement for Black lives and strategize on how to build resilient communities in the wake of COVID-19, this group sought to highlight the relevance of Malcolm's vision and world-making practice, specifically within the tradition of liberation theology, as a modality through which he framed dynamics of power, inequity, and sovereignty. In exploring Malcolm's local and global legacy through his lens, they sought to use his framework to also aid in the decolonizing and reframing of the relationship between Columbia, the Harlem community, and the Shabbat Center. Panelists included Professor Hisham Aidi, Professor Mark Lamont Hill, and Naja Zigby Johnson. And the discussion was moderated by none other than Sumaya Amin Zama. Here's a clip from their event.
That they're wondering if the panelists could speculate on Malcolm's reception and accessibility in mainstream liberal circles after the movement for Black Lives. CNN has recently tried to put up a more sort of leftist persona after Trump, but they couldn't tolerate, for example, Mark saying certain things. Do you think the context today is ripe for Malcolm's legacy to be received differently? And I know we've talked about, not placing Malcolm in certain situations, essentially non-consensually, I would say. But also I think there's something in there about liberalism and the state of liberalism.
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm wasn't a liberal. And so, Malcolm won't be received properly in mainstream liberal circles because his politics weren't that. I mean, think about in November of '63 when he gives the message to the grassroots speech. Right, Malcolm we'd had the March on Washington. We'd had a liberal march, an extraordinary event to be sure. But Malcolm was saying, "What are you fighting for? And what you want, a Black revolution or do you want a Negro revolution?" Right? Because Negro revolutions, you might be fighting to be able to use the same toilet as some folk, right? The Black revolution is about something else. And here's what's at stake when you have a Black revolution. It's about land. It includes bloodshed, right? And he goes around the world, again, invoking China, invoking Kenya. And Malcolm is making the argument very clearly that his decision between the Black revolution and Negro revolution, that he was rejecting Black liberalism, that Malcolm had a more, I think, ambitious, inclusive, and humane freedom dream, but also a more radical one. Mm-hmm. And so, Malcolm's name has been used more in mainstream circles. It's now safe to say Malcolm X in Black on the news, or wherever. But if we're talking about Malcolm's actual political vision, his actual project, I think it runs counter in many ways to what Black liberals are trying to do. And so when I hear Assata's name or Malcolm's name or other folks' names, sometimes I'm like, oh, this is great. It's dragging people back to where we need to be. But at other times, I feel like we're simply co-opting the legacy. And that's why, again, I'm gonna say this one more time. Malcolm's post-Hajj letters and identity and representation in the public imagination, particularly the mainstream liberal sphere, is so dangerous when it's misinterpreted. Malcolm did not go to Mecca, see white people, and then get converted. Right? First of all, Malcolm had seen white people before. Malcolm had seen white Muslims before. Malcolm had been to the Middle East before. It wasn't about that. Malcolm didn't suddenly become colorblind when he's in Mecca. What Malcolm said was, what Malcolm was recognizing, again, in sophisticated fashion, much like Du Bois in 1935, I believe, with Black Reconstruction, was the idea that there's something about American constructions of whiteness that we have to dismantle, right? He was saying those people, he said, what makes these white people in Mecca, he was saying that what he was rejecting was an ontological claim about white people. He was saying that white people aren't evil biologically. They're no longer who is the color man, Yakub's grafted devil, the skunk on the planet Earth. It was no longer lessons 1 to 10, number 2, right? He was saying something differently. he was saying that whiteness is a social construction that Americans have sort of been unable to avoid. And I'm sure the more Malcolm grew, he would be talking about this around the globe. But Malcolm was saying that whiteness is what we have to dismantle. That that white privilege and white power are things that we have to dismantle, right? And so these white people who are drinking from the Zemzem, these white people, if at their best, are okay because they haven't bought into that other thing. They haven't bought into the psychic wages of whiteness, as Du Bois talked about.
Great, great, great. That program, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Mark Lamont Hill as it was, so it was just really, but I became an even bigger fan of Sumaya and the work that she was able to do. So do you want to share a little bit about your inspiration for the program and for the grant and how you're gonna kind of continue this work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like this is such a privilege to even, sort of go back in time and talk about this event that so deeply impacted me. My inspiration for kind of wanting to apply for this grant was rooted in my move to New York. So I'm not native to New York. I'm a Boston community organizer. I've worked in civil rights work for 3 years prior to starting a master's program at Columbia. And moving to New York raised a lot of questions and concerns for me. I had concerns about the space that I am taking up as an individual, moving to a new space essentially as a settler, and what it means to move here without properly understanding the power dynamics, of the city itself, the power dynamics of Harlem, Morningside Heights, the power dynamics between Columbia as an institution and the land that we occupy. And so I was bringing a lot of those anxieties and those concerns to my program and to the beginning of my year here. And so when I saw this grant opportunity, I thought a lot about, for me as a community organizer, I instinctively was looking for other organizers in Harlem. And that journey sort of led me to the Shabazz Center and to Naja Zigby Johnson, who was my incredible co-planner for this event, and her and I were sort of joined at the hip for weeks, months leading up to this event. And so that was sort of where my inspiration was coming from. And, we, throughout this event, we're centering, so many different themes, but I think one of the main things that we were thinking so deeply about was to highlight this relationship between Columbia, again, like I said, as an institution, and the Harlem community, and to hold that conversation in radical honesty. And so, folks that have had the opportunity to, be at the event and listen to the event after the fact, which I encourage you to do, because all 3 panelists were absolutely incredible individuals. And the conversation was very much radical. Folks who have listened to the event have said, that was sort of the highlight, was to sort of put into context what it means to even say that I'm going to do, anti-racism work in the context of Harlem. What does that mean as a Columbia student and as someone who is connected to Columbia? And so where I sort of moved from here, I am committing for the rest of the summer to work closely with the Shabazz Center. I'm only here until the end of the summer, but I believe that so much of this work, in terms of how we can sort of give back to this community that has been our home, is to leverage our skill sets and resources as, master's students, as PhDs, as, students who are connected to this institution, is to leverage those skill sets and networks and resources for the community that is here. The Shabazz Center is in need of archival work, is in need of so many things that, Columbia students, graphic design, there's so many things that Columbia students, we know how to do. And if we have some time to sort of give back sort of those skill sets, that's sort of one of the things that I'm thinking about. And secondly, I'm headed to London for the second half of my master's, hopefully in mid-August. And I am again moving through those same anxieties that I had moving to New York City, where I'm now in a new context. And I'm thinking about power, and I'm thinking about who I am in London and what it means for me to be there. And specifically thinking a lot again about sort of this intersection of anti-Black Islamophobia, global anti-oppression. How are we contextualizing the movements from the summer, and the environment of COVID that we sort of find ourselves in this critical moment? How are we contextualizing ourselves within that space, and drawing these really important parallels? And so I'm excited to see what I am able to, move through in Europe, and what that would look like for me, because again, these anti-Blackness is not solely an American project. It is truly a global project, and I'm looking forward to helping to elevate the work of Black organizers and Black organizations as a non-Black person in a new space, hopefully in the future.
Well, we wish you the best of luck for sure. And if there's any indication based off of what you've been able to do here stateside, I know you're going to be amazing overseas. So definitely looking forward to the work that you've been able to accomplish. And we thank you so much. If you want to see the program, feel free to visit the University Life YouTube channel, but also connect with the Shabbat Center, which is right in our backyard, everyone. So if you haven't done your research, definitely do that and connect with that community. So thank you so much. I'd like to turn it over to another special guest. So
they're wondering.
We are going to go into another project that was part of the Racial Justice Mini Grant Program, developed, implemented, and still going on by Lauren Ritchie. The Small Island Sustainability Program is a virtual Q&A panel event that took place this spring with 3 Caribbean climate activists, as well as 1 scientist who specializes in the Caribbean. The discussion centered on what sustainability looks like in the Caribbean and why it's critical for small island nations to be included in the climate conversation. Here's a clip from Lauren Ritchie's moderated event.
Okay, well, just as kind of a final rounding off question before we get to the amazing, I've been reading through the questions, we've got the Q&A and they all look really great. But just to kind of conclude this great conversation that we've been having, what are some improvements that you all would like to see made, on the global stage regarding small island nations more generally, and just like overall global climate action? And I think thinking a little bit more specifically about how we can balance, advocacy and working on global issues with also addressing those specific needs and concerns for our immediate communities. And is there like a tension there, or are those efforts mutually reinforcing in part of the, whole overall, effort to see global climate action take place?
So if I may, I just say briefly, we have to continue to represent ourselves at the table. You start by getting your family, your friends, your neighbors together to build a sustainable model, whether it be for your community or for your business, right? Get the people that support you, get them involved, test it, and scale it up. So we have the answers for us, right? We just have to get more organized and pull them out.
With reference to what I would like to see with reference to like groundwater and hydrogeology, I've had this dream for like 2 years now, so I'm going to speak it into the atmosphere. I would like the Caribbean islands to have a water research center where all the CARICOM countries contribute funds, whatever they have. I know we don't have a lot of money, but in this location, you have specialists, for example, a hydrogeologist, you have someone who does sustainability stuff. And we go through each island and see what they need immediate help with. And we come up with plans, we do the science, and it has to be cohesive. No man is an island. None of us can do this alone because we're all tiny islands with small resources. And I think it's a project that can be done So because each island is different, they have different needs. And I would just like to see the CARICOM countries and just unify and work together with reference to the climate crisis, which is basically is causing the water crisis. We have the resources, we have the intelligence, we have the ability to get the software, we have the people. We just need to unify and start taking care and protecting our future with reference to water.
Definitely agreed. I'm just going to say a couple of things. I think CARICOM has to take matters way more seriously. I think we've seen since Dorian, we've seen some great political movement in terms of speaking up at places like the United Nations and these, multilateral and supranational institutions and places where we're supposed to talk about these issues and come together as a global community. And so hearing the Prime Minister of Barbados and the Prime Minister of the Bahamas speak very clearly about we need climate action now, like we have no choice. I think that's the kind of pressure we need globally, and we need our leaders across the region. Again, like Marcia is saying, I think that we need regional solidarity and regional solutions.
Awesome. I mean, some really great points. I have to highlight that, even myself, I'm not as familiar with sustainability practices. Nonetheless, overseas and in Caribbean countries, and as a woman who identifies as a Haitian woman, I absolutely appreciated this program. And Lauren is just an awesome individual who does this work every day, right? And so Lauren, can you share a little bit about your inspiration behind this project and sort of where do we go from here?
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for sharing the panel. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. But yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much to the Office of University Life for the Racial Justice Mini Grant and also for sharing this program. It was really exciting to me because, as Melissa said, I'm originally from the Bahamas. I'm in my third year now studying sustainable development. So climate change and climate action is something that I deal with on a regular basis. But I think the tension that I found, which is part of the reason why I started Columbia Climate Conversations as a broader idea, is that when you're studying sustainable development, especially within the department here at Columbia, there's not a lot of representation for people of color or for low-income communities, or even thinking about those intersections. And I think a lot of the time when we speak about the geological sciences or climate change, it's very much Western focused, but it's also just very much siloed in the types of people who are able to have these conversations or where this education is coming from. So Columbia Climate Conversations was really important for me to just have kind of a panel series to have people speak about their experiences and to share this educational information in a way that I don't think we've seen before, especially at the Earth Institute. Even in my education, for the most part, I'm being taught, by scientists, but by mostly white scientists. And even still, I think there is a tension in academia to value those degrees or to value that science instead of the firsthand experiences of people who have lived on the ground and have had these experiences for their entire lives. So that's what Columbia Climate Conversations is about. It's basically a way to have a panel for folks of color, folks from different backgrounds, to share their experiences with the climate crisis and how we can make climate action more inclusive. And then small island sustainability in particular, just as a Bahamian woman, it was really great to be able to speak with Caribbean climate activists and scientists, to hear from them firsthand about what it's like living in these countries that are currently going through the climate crisis without access to resources or without being able to fit into the stereotypical idea of what sustainability is in the West, whether that's, like thrifting or being vegan or being zero waste. I think one of my favorite parts of that conversation was just us talking about how we were sustainable in our own way in the Caribbean and how that deviated a lot from conversations we tend to hear about the end all be all of sustainability and how it can be kind of I guess a little hopeless feeling if you don't really fit into that and you don't feel like you can contribute. But that was really valuable to be able to hear those firsthand experiences. And I'm really excited to continue. I think after the Small Island Sustainability event, the final event that I did for the semester was a disability justice, which is also an intersection that we don't typically hear about within climate activism, but is very, very important when thinking about climate change. So very excited. I'm going to keep working with the Earth Institute this summer, and also some of these ideas that we've developed a lot in these conversations with Columbia Climate Conversations, trying to figure out ways to implement them into the curriculum in the climate school that the Earth Institute is developing, and also just continuing the panel series into my senior year next year means a lot to me. So that's
wow, and congratulations. I am so excited to hear. I mean, you are changing the world clearly, even, from wherever it is that you are. And again, I think the one thing we can all do is learn, research, right? Just look into it and see what role you can play in creating a better world for us and our community members. So thank you, Lauren. That's really awesome. So now I want to turn it over to two really awesome individuals who I was able to participate in their program, or at least, witness their program last week. And a really, I think, awesome program in that it provided so many different unique perspectives and panelists. I mean, one of the panelists was from Hawaii, and I was just like, whoa, this is pretty cool. But this program, Promoting Racial Justice in STEM Industries, focused on the lack of racial diversity in the STEM workforce. It is well documented, yet diverse workforces are known to drive innovation. Through this event, they aim to educate Columbia's future scientists, engineers, scientific thought leaders, and STEM managers about strategies that foster more racially inclusive workplaces. A keynote speech by Katrina Jones, a leader in DEI at Amazon Web Services, discussed strategies to recruit and retain racially diverse talent. Katrina then moderated a panel of 4 working PhD scientists who shared initiatives that they are leading within their workplaces, communities, and through their research promoting racial justice. So yeah, Will and Allison, did you want to speak a little bit more about the event and sort of where do we go from here?
Hi, yeah, we would love to do that. And yeah, just first of all, just thank you so much for including us in this mini grant program and giving us the chance to share our work that we were doing this semester. And so Will and I are executive members of the Biological Sciences Career Initiative, or BSI, and this is a student-run organization that educates current PhD students in the Biological Sciences department about non-academic career paths that are available to them. And so the goal of our event, like Melissa said, was basically to introduce students in STEM departments, especially grad students who will eventually work in industry, about what they can do to create more racially equitable workplaces as students and after graduating, and also to provide some info about what kinds of DEI and anti-racist initiatives are currently underway outside of academia. And so we wanted to apply to this program because we felt that our training as PhD students in biology really lacked a real engagement with issues of racial justice and equity, especially like as allies, like who are not people of color. And so we wanted to provide a space for this conversation to happen between STEM students, like on Columbia's campus, especially before they were sort of thrust into the workplace in leadership or management positions.
And the reason we felt this was so important was because as a whole, STEM lags behind other industries in terms of racial diversity, with Black, Indigenous, and Hispanic workers being particularly underrepresented. And then members of these groups are potentially missing out on an important route for socioeconomic advancement, as STEM jobs are expanding and tend to be well paid. But this is also unfortunate for businesses because diverse workforces increase innovation. And then additionally, technology creation itself can reflect, reinforce, and even shape cultural values. So it's imperative to have the entire population well represented at all levels in STEM. And then we hope to engage students on how they could better advance racial justice, both while at Columbia and then later in the workforce and in management positions.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, well, you just hit a great point that essentially a diverse team provides diverse thought and it provides diverse experiences. So ultimately, keeping that conversation going is just going to be so helpful, right, to the industry. And STEM, I think, is growing and is going to continue to grow. And so I love that these conversations are happening. And I know that you and Allison put in so much work into this program, and they were so intentional, everyone, about making sure that voices were heard and that communities were well represented, and that it was not only experts in the field of STEM, but experts in the field of racial justice and ensuring that there are inclusive spaces everywhere. So thank you, Allison and William, for the work that you were able to do with this program. So awesome. I am going to move forward to another really awesome and special guest from the Speak Up organization, Addressing Race and Racism in the Classroom. This project's primary goal is to facilitate conversations on anti-racism at the School of International and Public Affairs by providing opportunities for students and faculty to understand how issues of race and anti-Black racism can be prevalent in both policy development and the classroom. And we heard feedback even from folks who participated in the program that it was just a really great program that ultimately other faculty members and students and community members should participate in. So Samia, would you speak a little bit more about the program?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. And thanks for saying that. It's so good to hear that the feedback was positive. And I also want to say how inspired I am to be in this group of folks right now. It's hard to find people who are so passionate about equity that they would spend time and resources during a school year to pursuing the cause. And I hope that there's a way that we can stay connected through this, because I'd love to continue to learn more about your work and support everybody here. And a little bit more about our project is that I'm here on behalf of RISE, which is the working group on race, inequality, solidarity, and economics. I'm the steering committee coordinator, but I'm just one of 6 folks who work together to organize the event. And we are based at SIPA. And when we met for the first time a few months ago, we'd all agreed that we'd seen microaggressions, racism on campus, in the classroom, and certainly in our professional lives. And we didn't feel like we were always equipped to intervene when we saw it. And we also knew that there were faculty, staff, and students who felt the same way. And so we wanted to target a really small but very practical part of the problem, which was how to, empower people to intervene when they see microaggressions happening. So we decided to apply to the Racial Justice Mini Grant to organize a workshop to help the SIPA community, that's the faculty, staff, and students, identify, interrupt, and mitigate bias when they see it, as they're seeing it. And we were thrilled that we got the grant, and we used it to hire a facilitator. Her name is Candice Stansel. I know she's done work with SIPA before and in the Columbia community before. She's the founder of the Common Good Agency. And we cannot recommend her strongly enough. And just for some context, her work focuses on DEI capacity building for higher education institutions and nonprofits. So it was a great match, and she really skillfully, I should say, helped us build a program that met our goals. The program itself was spread over 2 days, end of March and early April. And it started with us kind of delving into our own experiences with microaggressions and racism. And then it delved into a lot more structured, methodical ways to identify and interrupt bias when we see it on campus. So we did this across students, faculty, and staff, and we had a lot of time to work together in small groups to think about what anti-racist classrooms look like, and also to practice a little bit of to practice some of these skills with a scenario that Candice gave us. I think one of the most powerful parts of this program was that faculty, students, and staff all came together to work on this. And, we're all critical members of the Columbia community and the SIPA community, but rarely have a chance to interact with each other so personally on such a personal and critical issue. I felt like I learned a lot by being in the breakout rooms that I was in with staff members and other students. And I feel like that was a very powerful part of the experience for a lot of people as well. And in terms of where we are going from here, we also got strong feedback from students who wanted to see more of this, and we're hoping to make this an annual event, expand outreach to more of the SIPA community. We had 45 folks attend both days, but we'd like to see that number grow. And we also hope to find a way to make this more a part of the broader anti-racism training at SIPA. This work is not easy, and it's not the only part of the work that needs to be done. We're well aware that not everybody is even on the same page when it comes to anti-racism training and the need for it, but we think that it is critical work to helping build safe communities, and it's certainly critical to our work as policy leaders at SIPA. So we want to thank again the Office of University Life for all your support. Thank you, Melissa. You were wonderful throughout the entire process. And we hope that we can partner again.
Awesome. And yes, as you can see, I mean, you know, all of the work that this group has done has paid off. Like we said, we received feedback from multiple sources and saying that this was just a really great opportunity for them. So thank you, Samia, and to the group for creating this opportunity for us. So next, I'm going to move forward to another group that had a really awesome program, the Racialization of Reproductive Justice, in conversation with Loretta Ross. So although we do not have a representative from this group, we are going to play a clip from their event. Loretta Ross's work teaches the idea that reproductive justice is a multidisciplinary issue impacting not just access to medical care, but also environmental racism, the state's legacy of sterilizing people of color, community violence, family separation, the welfare system, mass incarceration, and other issues stemming from systemic anti-Black racism. This university-wide lecture with Professor Ross provided a strong foundation and timely understanding of reproductive justice in the United States for the Columbia community. So now we're going to play a short clip from the event.
And so reproductive justice is not that hard to understand. It has three basic human rights principles that we demand. First of all, we have the human right to have a child. And the reason that this is one of our leading tenets is because Black women, since the end of slavery, have always had to fight strategies of population control, as our fertility is demonized and our bodies are criminalized, as I'll talk about later. So by centering ourselves in the lens, we knew we needed to come up with a framework that talked about the right to have a child. But we also, when we created the framework, joined and overlapped with the pro-choice movement because we fight equally hard for the right not to have a child. And that means fighting for the right to access birth control, abortion, abstinence, if you can hold on. And then we spawned from both those first two movements, a whole new movement that has called itself the birth justice movement. Because when you talk about the right to have a child, you're talking about the midwifery movement, the doula movement, the right to refuse unnecessary cesareans, the right to have your birth plans respected when you go to the hospital and those kind of things. And of course, the third tenet of reproductive justice, the right to raise our children in safe and healthy environments, brings us into conversation with all the other things.
Awesome. So of course, you know, just given time, you know, if there's so much more information that we can share, but if you did want to see more, visit the University Life YouTube channel and you can see this conversation with Loretta Ross. I know I learned so much even just from that conversation alone. So next I'm going to move forward to another really group. From our initial conversation, we recognized that there was a need for this. And that the two students who kind of put this together, I think, you know, already says a lot about their leadership and their impact on the community. So the Black Thesis Writing Group brings together Black juniors and seniors who are writing and researching for their senior thesis. This group allows students to support each other by sharing research ideas, techniques, and giving peer feedback. It was their hope that at the end of the semester, students will present their projects to other Black students on campus, particularly Black underclassmen who wish to learn about different departments at Columbia and Barnard. So Ari, did you want to share a little bit about the experience?
Hi, yes, my name is Ari Jones and I use any pronouns, and I'm also here presenting with my co-founder, Brianna Wood. And yes, the Black Thesis Working Group came out of just like a conversation we had back and forth, you know, at the end of a meeting of another club we're both a part of, Proud Colors. And, you know, we were just talking back and forth, you know, about like how there really seems to be this lack of like community, especially like because of COVID. And so we saw this as an opportunity to bring students together, particularly students who need support. So thesis writers, and I was a thesis writer myself. And we just thought to create a space for this, for students and also for juniors to be able to talk with upperclassmen about like what it means to write a thesis and how to, write a proposal and get your information in on time and do your research and go through the institutional review board process.
Awesome. And I know if there is anyone in this group who wants to offer their support or just give them a round of applause or just generally, I am noticing, Ari, are you your class of 2021 or congratulations. Just have to say that. I know you are going to go on to do great things. From our initial conversation. I just saw your passion in not only wanting to support others, but really just create, inclusive environments and affinity spaces and safe spaces for those who identify as Black students at Columbia. And I really can't say anything other than thank you. So thank you for your work with that. Great. And so next I'm going to speak about a program that is still in the works. Trisha, who was able to produce a program called See You Against Racism, a podcast series exploring anti-racist efforts at Columbia. So this program is specifically focused on the testimonials and experiences of Columbia students. It is a 5-part podcast series that is continuing to be released. And this series explores anti-racist efforts at Columbia and highlights the hard work of student activists, the encouragement of faculty, and key decisions made by the university that have brought Columbia closer to being an equitable school. Each episode aims to spark a conversation around how far Columbia has come and what else can we do to promote racial justice in our community. So for each 30-minute episode, Trisha Mukherjee will interview students, faculty members, and administrators to paint a thought-provoking portrait of our activism as a community. So Trisha couldn't join us for today's conversation, but she encourages you to listen to the episodes, and we will also be sharing them via our social media platforms. So thank you, Trisha, for your work. Next, I want to move forward to a project that I think, has really just sort of grown from the beginning of its inception and is not done, right? And the 2 individuals who have been a part of this project are just 2 really, I think, hardworking leaders who you're going to continue to hear their name. So this program series, comprising virtual interactive workshops, is a collaboration between the Rho chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Eta chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. It's a project whose purpose is to engage Columbia students in conversation and action around Black issues and the long-term effects of anti-Black racism, both in our communities and across the diaspora. So Travis, I know, is here with us today, but we're going to go ahead and play a clip from their event and then hear from Travis about the experience.
But thank you so much, Colby. Chelsea, hello, thanks for joining us today. I read you in earlier, so I did read your bio. And the question that I had actually asked everybody, this is sort of start everybody out, was to just talk about and give voice to your experience, in your circles, in your movements. How would you talk about systemic racism and the role that youth play in impacting that from your walk?
Hi everyone, so excited to be here this evening. Sorry for being late, was coming out of another meeting. Okay, so we're hopping right into it, it sounds. The question about young people and systemic racism. So a lot of unpacking there. One of the biggest things that I say, at least within my activism, and I know that you read my bio earlier, but just a little bit about me for folks who may have come on after, or just always good to kind of have my perspective on it. So the way that I talk about my work is that I'm a social entrepreneur and activist, which is important because I think about what does it look like to sustainably support movements and understanding the importance of being able to be in this for the long haul, and what does it look like to ultimately create spaces for young people to lead, but also understand that there is a journey in leadership and there are communities that need to be built. And so one of the biggest things that I talk about within the work that I do as the co-founder of Freedom March NYC is the importance of not only amplifying the voices of Black women on the front lines, but also also the importance of sustainably doing that work. And so we create policy, we work with all different aspects of just the world, from media on centering the message of the movement when we think about youth activism, but also what does racial justice work look like, to working with
Yes, there's so much more we want to play, but of course we, want to keep in mind about time. But Chelsea Miller, I mean, if you haven't heard about her work, you should definitely do some more research in that, and really explore the work of student activism. I say this all the time. We don't talk much about the civil rights movement's student activism that existed, but really, students like you all who are doing this work are paving the road for racial justice. And so I will continue to encourage to do that work. But Travis, did you want to share a little bit about this project? And I know you also recently hosted a program, but yeah, talk a little bit about, your inspiration and where do we go from here?
So first and foremost, thank you so much. I really do appreciate this time, this forum, and of course, all of the different projects that I've heard about. I think overall, the culmination of all of these different experiences and these different vantage points have really added to the overall conversation of what we're trying to see manifest at Columbia, and of course, the greater, United States, New York community, et cetera, et cetera. I would say specifically with this project, first and foremost, I have to shout out the Rho chapter of Delta Sigma Theta for their tireless work with this. Lexi Young is really just an amazing partner, a hard worker, and her work cannot be understated. She wasn't able to make it today, but I guess you guys have me. That being said, the real focal point of the reason behind us wanting to do this project in the first place was over the last, I'd say 3-4 years, the time that I've been at Columbia, there have just been rising incidents of just foolishness, particularly from the student body, people who we consider our peers, that have been, of course, then amplified by the administration, by their lack of action or just the actions that they have taken, which have not been sufficient. One of the first blinding incidents of this was 2017. Myself and Lexi, we were freshmen at the time before we were even members of our organizations. And the Columbia College Republicans had invited some very bigoted speakers to speak on campus, and President Bollinger, of course, under the guise of free speech, which is understandable, allowed them to come to campus. And just the uproar and just the schism between us understanding the line between free speech and what speech really can do, and what certain words can impose on a student body was just so blurred. And then it continued with sadly, in the fall of 2018, a student by the name of Julian Von Abel, just harassing some students actually after an event that my organization had hosted. And then further that semester, a student being harassed at Barnard for not showing his identification, although he was being a student. And so for us, the 3 events that we held, the first being Black student activism and the nuances of how that activism has changed at Columbia, as well as the environment, from the 60s and onward, and then further into Black anti-Blackness in medicine, anti-Blackness in tech. And then the last event we held was really just kind of like a social action kind of meeting to really kind of delve into a really tangible and items that we can bring forward to the university and of course the student body to continue this work far beyond the conversations that we were having as a function of receiving this grant. And so this big opening event was really special because we had panelists all the way back from the 1960s. We had an alum, Rufus Sadler, who actually happens to be a member of my organization, who was one of the co-founders of the Black Student Organization at Columbia. His sister was one of the co-founders of the BOSS at Barnard, and they were here around the time in 1968 when, of course, the Malcolm X Lounge was happening, the sit-ins were happening, and just so to have those vantage points, the vantage point of Chelsea, as well as our other panelists who were there to kind of speak to those issues at the micro level, at the historical level, and then of course at the institutional and systemic level was really engaging and really offered just much more of a rich conversation. And then it continued into the conversations, I said, into the events we had prior. And so one of the things moving forward that we definitely are interested in doing is continuing to build on that that student action kind of list. I'm forgetting the exact name of what we were calling it, but it was an action-oriented plan that we really want to bring forward for student groups, for students themselves, because again, as I said, there's an individual and a group component to this. The individual level is our interactions between each other as peers, how we can continue to educate our classmates and those around us in the different departments and the different schools that we are at on how that they can break down anti-racism at Columbia. And then at the institutional and systemic level, how can Columbia stop perpetrating these things, break down these biases and this historical racism that has been perpetrated by the university since its inception. And then systemically, whether that be through divestment from certain things that we've been a part of, advocating for just further action from outside parties, whether that be political factors, business people, and utilizing our alumni network to continue to do those things as well. I think one of the biggest things we realize is, as a function of being at this incredible university, you know, with that great pedigree also comes great responsibility for us to continue to pay it forward. Specifically in the Harlem community is one of the places that we mentioned because we realized that was important. So overall, thank you, Melissa, and everybody else for the ability to do this project. And we really look forward to continuing this.
And it's not over, right? The work will continue to happen. And thank you, Travis, and thank you to Lexi, who cannot be here today. But ultimately, I was a senior when Trayvon Martin, not to age myself, but I was a senior when Trayvon Martin, or a junior, when he was killed. And I recognized that there was a need for me to be a student, but also to be a Black woman in this country. And I had to navigate what it meant to process that experience, but also make an impact on the community and provide those spaces. And Travis and Lexi, it sounds like you are both, and your organizations are providing the spaces, having the conversations, and pushing accountability from every member of our community. And I appreciate that. So thank you so much for the work that you all have been able to do. So we're looking forward to seeing more. Thank you all for hanging with us. We are at our final.
But thank you so much, Kobe. Chelsea.
We are at our final group, Creating Anti-Bias, Anti-Racist Framework for Language Learning. We have Isabella Lavorni, Andy Wyatt, and Manuela Lenguas. The Anti-Racist Language Pedagogy Working Groups project will question and transform pre-existing materials and topics in language learning courses to implement anti-bias, anti-racist curricula and teach practices in language departments across Columbia. This group will work with experts from Teachers College Center for the professional education of teachers to develop a framework for making and assessing ABAR course materials in Columbia's language departments. So yeah, Isabella, Andrew, Manuela, feel free to share a little bit about your project.
Thank you so much, Melissa, Gabby, and the Office of the University Life for supporting our project. The Anti-Racist Language Pedagogy Working Group started during summer 2020. We are all graduate students and language instructors teaching Italian, French, and Spanish. While we are interested in anti-bias, anti-racist pedagogy in broader contexts as well, we seek to apply these pedagogical approaches to language learning, since we see it as a particularly truthful meeting point of many different cultures, perspectives, and ideas. We acknowledge and seek to work against the biases, racism, and representational violence in the various cultural contexts that intersect in our classrooms, our university setting, ours and our students' cultural context, and the cultural context we teach in.
And so none of us are experts in anti-bias, anti-racist education, and so much has already been done in this field. So we knew from when we started this group that a central part of our group would involve working with experts to determine how to create larger curricular and policy changes across language departments and language classrooms at Columbia. So in fall 2020, we met with Dr. Cherise Holloman and Dr. Roberta Langer-Kang, who you'll see Cherise on the left, right? That's left, and Roberta on the right. And they're from the Center for the Professional Education of Teachers at Teachers College. And together with support from Faith Little in the middle, we came up with a plan to develop a framework for what anti-bias, anti-racist language instruction might look like in our departments and classrooms. So it's really important to us that the experts we work with be compensated for their time. So that's a large reason why we applied to the Racial Justice Mini Grant, and we are so grateful that you all allowed us to meet that commitment.
So we're currently in the first phase of our project, developing a framework for anti-bias, anti-racist language instruction in our departments at Columbia. We conducted research and spent time gathering resources to see what anti-bias, anti-racist pedagogy entails for different instructors who practice it. And then throughout a series of sessions designed by Drs. Holloman and Kang, we discussed the obstacles we've seen in implementing anti-bias, anti-racist pedagogy in the language classroom, what an ideal classroom and department implementing this approach looks like with regards to course policy and curriculum, and what we imagine student engagement in this process to look like. So in the next few weeks with our collaborators from Teachers College, we will be synthesizing and refining our ideas into a set of guidelines. In other words, the first iteration of the framework. This framework will then, in a second phase of the project, serve as a kind of rubric that we will use to evaluate current materials and practices and to create new ones. And finally, we will present the framework to our departments and to the broader language learning community at Columbia in order to gather feedback. This feedback will then be used to revise the framework. Ultimately, the development of this framework is an iterative process aimed at bringing awareness of anti-bias, anti-racist pedagogy into ours and our colleagues' language instruction, and we hope to create some lasting curricular and policy changes. Our work is ongoing. In the future, we hope to collaborate with more experts, expand our membership to be more reflective of Columbia's language learning community, and in particular to invite undergraduate feedback and collaboration regarding the framework. So thank you so much to Melissa, Gabby, and the Office of University Life. And thank you to all of the other recipients of the grant. It's been really inspiring to hear about all of your projects.
I want everyone to recognize that, and even in this group and the other recipients, you all are students. You all are already doing all of the work of what it means to be a student. And particularly in this language group, you all noticed an issue and really kind of took it upon yourselves to want to create change. And I just want to say thank you for that. And I do truly believe that this work that you all are doing, Isabella, Manuela, Andrew, and the rest of your team is going to make an impact. And so I'm so excited to see where this goes from here. And for the rest of the members who are on this call and this conversation, my hope is that you all will also support each other in your ongoing projects. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to our grantees for sharing their time, experiences, research, and the process that brought their visionary projects to fruition. I want to remind everyone that tonight's event is part of the Racial Justice Mini Grant Program. This was our inaugural year of launching the Mini Grants Program, and we hope to learn from this year and carry it forward to ensure others have an opportunity to participate in future years. We invite you to learn more about the grantees and their projects and to be on the lookout for future opportunities to take part in the program. Follow us on social media where we'll highlight projects made possible by the Mini Grants Program. If you are not already following us on Instagram or Facebook, this is a great time to start, especially as you saw all of the content that we were able to share today, so you can be able to see more. And check out University Life's event calendar on our homepage for upcoming events, announcements, and more.